Hi, everybody, and welcome to the third panel of Hats Off for Headwaters 2021, which is Colorado Headwaters Land Trust annual fundraiser. This is the third panel, which we are calling the Land Trust panel because it includes three of our current board members, who I'm currently asking to unmute and start their videos. Hats Off for Headwaters is a week-long event held from October 3rd to October 10th, 2021. To help raise awareness and money, fundraising for Colorado Headwaters Land Trust, which is the local land trust of Grand County, Colorado. The first panel was held on Sunday, October 3rd, with two local conservation professionals, Myrae Sullivan of Headwaters Trails Alliance and Miles Miller of the United States Forest Service. Our second panel was held on Tuesday, October 5th, which was with four landowners who have conservation easements on their properties. Dr. Mike Brooks, Kathy Knoble, and Brock and Susan Doty. And then tonight we have CHLT Board President Paula Stuart, Board Treasurer David Doty, and Board Member Stuart McNab. We'll be here for about 45 minutes to an hour to talk about their experiences with the Land Trust, their visions of the organization, and what conservation means to them. So without further ado, we'll kick it off. And Paula, I'll ask you to introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Paula Stuart, and I moved to Fraser permanently 2 years ago with my husband, Gordon, from New Jersey. And initially came here 5 years ago, and because my daughter and son-in-law lived in Denver, and they were intrigued with how much they love skiing at the Winter Park Resort. And so we came for the summer for them to have the winter, and then we loved the summer so much, we decided to buy property, build a house, and come here for the winter too. And everyone in New Jersey said, why aren't you going south? And we said, well, because we really don't like the heat and humidity, and the climate was very appealing. So anyway, that's how I ended up here. And do you want me to talk about what attracted me to the Land Trust now, or?
Not yet. Let's just do introductions.
Okay, so I have a bachelor's degree in economics, and I have a master's degree in environmental law that it seems impossible, but it was 21 years ago from Vermont Law School. And that's really when I turned away from the for-profit world and became involved both as a volunteer and also professionally in the environmental world. So, so this was a natural progression for me coming to Colorado and continuing that involvement with the environmental world.
Thank you. Dave.
David Doty. I have been in Colorado for 24 years, I think. And prior to that, I had also attended University of Colorado, where I met my wife, who is a native Coloradan, and learned to ski at Winter Park when she was about 4 years old. And we have always had an affinity for the Valley and purchased land I think it's 14 years ago, and built a house. And I do maintain a residence on the Front Range, but we spend as much time as possible up in Fraser, and just have enjoyed the mountains the whole time we've been here. So very much outdoor family.
Thank you.
And what drew me to Land Trust, my first introduction was the fact that our property that we purchased is adjacent to one of our holdings, so I became aware of it at that point and thought it was such a wonderful idea to preserve open space, and was a friend of a former board member, and continued to garner more knowledge about it, and had always, really loved Grand County. And I am very much supportive of responsible development, but in that vein, at the same time, trying to protect and preserve the feeling and association that Grand County has, which I think is unique in the Colorado mountains, and trying to balance the growth that we've seen with sort of the history and the background of the county. So I'm hoping that by my involvement, I can do anything I can to protect that.
Great. Well, thank you. Stuart, like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Stuart McNab. I've been a landowner. My wife and I have been landowners in Grand County for almost 40 years. We moved up here from the foothills outside of Denver in 2014. And we spent a lot of time looking at property when we were just decided to move up here. And that really gave me an appreciation for what Grand County has and what perhaps some other locations in the mountains don't have. And that's how I got very interested. We were involved, at least as contributors, to the Mountain Area Land Trust in the foothills west of Denver. And they did a lot of good work in preserving properties that otherwise definitely would have been developed. I'm a mostly retired lawyer at this point, and but I think that what we're doing is important, and that's how I got interested in the mission. And I really want to see, ever since I've been involved in Grand County, people have said, well, we don't want this to become Silverthorne, and that's what everybody says. But unfortunately, what we see between Fraser and Winter Park, unfortunately, looks worse than Silverthorne right now. And so that's part of why I'm interested in it. The other thing, I'm very interested in preserving ag land for ag purposes. Ranch land does not sell for the value of ranch land, it sells for the value of development. And if we as an institution can help protect the historic ranching activities that go on in this county, I think that's a great thing.
That's great. And before I turn it back to Paula, for anyone watching this now, if you go and watch the landowner panel from Tuesday, there was a lot of discussion about ranching and agricultural heritage. Two of the landowners present, Dr. Mike Brooks and Kathy Knoebel. Dr. Brooks is an active rancher at the moment, but both of them have used their properties for ranching many generations in the past. So that is certainly open space and scenic views and wildlife are all very important, but we also focus on agriculture and the ranching history of Grand County. So thank you for bringing that up, Stuart. Paula, since David and Stuart both mentioned it, why don't you say what attracted you to the Land Trust and really what brought you to this call tonight?
Well, first, it was, I researched if there was an organization that was a land trust in Grand County and found that Colorado Headwaters Land Trust was the one that served only Grand County. So that was my initial introduction. And I also had worked for an organization in New Jersey that had been accredited by the Land Trust Alliance. And when I saw that Colorado Headwaters Land Trust was accredited, I knew about the parameters, the demands, and how strenuous the process was to become accredited because I had worked on that myself in New Jersey for one of the organizations that I worked for at one point. So those were the two main drivers for me, that it was Grand County, that was the focus. It was the headwaters of the Colorado River, and water has really been a driver for me in terms of what I did when I was professionally, when I bought land to preserve water for two different reservoirs in New Jersey, and through a state agency. And we almost, well, let's put it this way. My husband and I took a lot of time to think about the water availability before we moved here. And so for me to be involved in this organization and to work on land preservation is really important to both of us.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, so the current board of Colorado Headwaters Land Trust has 9 members on it. And Stuart is actually our longest serving board member, just rounding out 2 terms and starting a 3rd. And I'd like to start with him to ask Stuart, how have you seen the Land Trust change over the last 6 years being on the board? And if you can provide insight to prior to that, just how have you seen it change and evolve, and what gives you hope?
Well, there's several things. Primarily, I think when I got on the board, it had gone through a period of stability in a sense. Management had been the same for a long time, but there was not any great, I'd say the financial situation of the land trust. We had money to do what we needed to do, but it was a sort of a hand-to-mouth existence in terms of the day-to-day operations of the entity, and so then we had a period of sort of instability, and then we have now evolved to a period where we have much more stability in terms of the operations and management of the organization, as well as we have more financial stability. We've done a better job as a board, as an organization in raising funds and being able to support ourselves on an ongoing basis without sort of looking at the beginning of the fiscal year and thinking, well, if this happens, then we'll survive. Right. So it's been very rewarding that way. Then the other thing, in the more important in some ways, you can't diss the importance of the financial capability of the organization, but in terms of our conservation mission, I see the land trust as certainly our purpose is to serve people in Grand County who want to protect their lands and conserve their lands. But I think we've also, with the board as it's evolved and so on, we've generated a bigger vision for what we want to do. We've undertaken bigger projects. We've been a little, I think, more aggressive about getting involved in projects. Not all of these have come to fruition and so on, but I think we're looking at bigger things. We will still take small easements and so forth and go through that process. But I think we opened our eyes and see a broader mission that we can maybe accomplish over time. Then I guess the last thing is that right when I got on the board in 2016, we undertook to help the county pass, a 0.1% sales tax that goes to the Open Rivers Land and Trails Fund, 15% of which is used for trail maintenance in the county, and the rest is used for preserving open lands and waters. And that has been very helpful to us. But it's also just it's a real thing for the county because it's brought the awareness that preserving, conserving land and so forth is something that the county wants to do, and the people who voted for it and approved the tax definitely wanted it to go forward. So that's been another big accomplishment since I've been on the board.
Sure. And I'll say that as we have in previous videos, I will include a link if you'd like to learn more about the Open Lands, Rivers, and Trails Fund. Will be in the caption of this video. So thank you, Stuart, for that great insight into the history here. Paula, I'll turn back to you. So you've been on the board for about, I'm looking at my chart over here. So for about 2 years, almost 3 years. And what is your reflection over your first term? And then also looking to the future. How do you envision the land trust growing and changing over the next however many years?
Well, I think, first of all, I feel very privileged to be a part of this board, given the history of the organization and also the quality of the people who serve as volunteers, as well as yourself as our paid executive director, which I was probably one of the first people you interviewed. Right. But I think that I'm pleased that we've revised our strategic plan, and I think that I think in terms of growth that we will continue to preserve land, but also I think we've talked a lot in the last 6 to 9 months at different gatherings, mostly on Zoom, that we need to increase our efforts in education, and so that people who are landowners and who are the title companies, the attorneys, the real estate people that are representing landowners, that they know more about what the process is for conservation easements and what the importance is and what the benefits could be, including the increase in the state tax credits, which just come about recently. And so I feel very encouraged about the future. I listened today to a lecture in the Land Trust Alliance annual conference growing the land trust or leading the land trust into the next 50, 100 years or whatever. And one of the things they talked about a great deal was stability, financial stability, which Stuart mentioned. And David has certainly brought his expertise going through COVID. And, we didn't know what to think a year ago. So in terms of reflection, when COVID hit and all the doors were slammed and we really didn't know what to think, whether people would contribute to us, to our mission, or whether their contributions would go elsewhere. And I remember a very good letter that you wrote talking about that, and that in the sense that as an organization, we understood if a person or people chose not to contribute because there were so many other needs for food and shelter. And so I feel very encouraged, very excited about the future. And I think we have a part to play here in Grant County, and that we will continue to grow and to play that part.
Great. Well, thank you. We seem to have lost David, but that's okay. He might come back.
Sorry.
Okay.
All
right. Well, that is a good point from Paula, that it does take a lot of community support and community action, as Stuart echoed. Well, since we're only down to you and me, Stuart, why don't we'll just go on to say, you've mentioned one of the driving factors of your support of the organization and your support of our mission being agricultural history and the agricultural heritage of the region. But I'm curious to know, and this is a very broad question, but what does conservation mean to you? What does it mean to live in a place such as Grand County?
Well, I don't know. I come to what does it mean to me with the background of having come to Colorado in 1974, when a lot more of the state was like it is now, like Grand County is now, but a lot of other places aren't. We have this enormous population on the Front Range, which looks at the western slope as its playground, because recreation doesn't cause any harm to anything like the other industries. And frankly, we need to protect Colorado. For me, it's part of preserving for my children and maybe someday grandchildren, who knows, what we had in Colorado when I was in college, where this is why I came to Colorado, and have had since then. And, if we don't do that, if we don't conserve this land, it's just going to continue to get, developed. And we've already lost some, but we're going to lose a lot of what it is that brought people to Colorado in the first place.
Sure. Yeah, and you've been mentioning a lot of these other geographical locations around our region, Silverthorne and the Front Range. Nothing against them, of course.
No. It's just the reality of what we've got. I mean,
right.
Silverthorne's not bad, and frankly, it looks better than parts of Grand County right now. But no, it's interesting because Silverthorne is much more developed than Grand County. The Silverthorne, Dillon, that area of Summit County. I mean, we sometimes go over there to go stores and do stuff that we might otherwise have gone to Denver to do. And that's just because of the population there and that it supports and so on. And we can't, I don't think we can close the door.
No.
But the point is, if you can conserve land, certain properties around, for example, on the west side of Highway 40 between the Fraser ball fields and Tabernash is in a conservation easement. We don't hold that easement. That's held by the county, and that was donated by the Denver Water Board, which bought that ranch. Now they dried it up because that was the purpose, as I understand it. That purpose was to get the water for it. But nevertheless, that's a stretch of property that will not be developed like the stretch between Winter Park and Fraser. And that's the kind of thing I'd like to see us get more of.
Sure. And it's worth mentioning that the Stadelman Ranch, which is that conservation easement, it is still leased for cattle, and it still embraces that history of Grand County there. Stuart, one more point is, I remember when I first came here, whether it was you or Cray or somebody else, you said, physically, we are between Summit and Jackson counties, and we want to be between Summit and Jackson, where Breckenridge and Frisco and even Silverthorne, very developed, and Jackson, not very developed. And that actually gave me a really good understanding of where I was physically, but also what our goals were, and gave me very real examples of kind of what our mission was for the community itself.
Yeah, you got to understand, Grand County, notwithstanding where we live in, it is a very rural county. There are only, what, 14,000 people that live here, and we're physically very, very large. And I'm all for preserving our rural character as much as we possibly can.
That's right. That's right. So David, the question that I had asked was how you envision the organization growing or changing over the next few years. And you've also been on the board for a number of years. So if you want to tie that in and see how it's changed so far and where you perceive it going in the next 5 or 10 or however many years.
Well, I mean, I think Stuart spoke to it. One is the establish a comfortable consistency, that allows us to expand our reach. So we've gotten to that point where we have a great base. We've got great leadership, great participation. So now we can start almost like expanding our wings. And I think the wings expanding, is a lot has to do with education. I feel very comfortable that large landowners in the county and elsewhere are very familiar with the option for land trusts. However, I think Paula mentioned this, there's just so many other people that we could educate about it that are professionals that might see an opportunity that someone hasn't thought of this as a possible solution to investigate, so that we're out in the community and we're out and build that understanding and awareness. But then, I'm always interested by the fact that, there's a large amount of people, whether they're permanent residents in the county or visitors that do not, do not currently own large tracts of land or will never own large tracts of land. So they aren't really a utilizer, but they are people that can be concerned and support what we're trying to do. And I feel strongly that we should continue to grow that support function of that group that says, this is what we envision our county to be. And we strongly support this and advocate, to garner more opportunities. And I mean, it is such a delicate balance. And I think one of the things that has always drawn me, and many, many, many others to the Valley was this balance between the two. And you've mentioned it, whether it's, between the two counties or, the fact, we certainly aren't, on the I-70 corridor or the Summits and the Eagles that, and one of the big things is, sort of our secluded location combined with our rural history. We still are very, very much associated with ranching, and I love that. And how do we preserve that and provide that opportunity and motivation to have land trusts as a solution for landowners to, to both continue their areas, but also understand the economic pressures that many, many people are under, that you're like, well, what else can we do? I don't envision us selling the land for condos or whatever, but I do envision us, but I do have family members and extended that have different needs and different responsibilities. And we all understand that. And that's where we are providing such a great solution and option.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the future's up right now. I think we're seeing, you know, I'm very pleased and proud of how much activity we've been able to do, and I'm hoping that we can expand into other areas of, you know, continue to educate and provide this resource.
Thank you. Well, Paula, I'll turn back to you to ask what conservation means to you. You've been in conservation for most of your career, both here and back on the East Coast. And so you've certainly seen, lived in, and helped protect a wide variety of landscapes. So what does simply conservation mean to you? What does Middle Park and the Rocky Mountains mean to you? Just kind of, I know you take that question and run.
Well, I do believe that in the broadest sense that that we need to leave the land, if not the same, certainly better than we found it. And I did move from northern Vermont, which was probably the least populated state, to New Jersey, where I lived for 18 years before I moved out here. And people would say, well, you know, New Jersey's built out. There's nothing that can be done. But there really was quite a bit that was going on there. And I think that what I really learned by living in New Jersey for 18 years, after having grown up there, was that there does need to be a balance between development and the land. And because the land can't speak, sorry, my dog, the land can't speak for itself. And so one of the things that I worked on for 5 years was to try to pass a well test ordinance for interference and in New Jersey, for example. I mean, it was very difficult to explain to the people who had no scientific background and no interest in geology what it meant to drill into an aquifer. And so I finally used the example of a glass of water with 5 straws and everybody drinking at the same time. And one person went, oh, really? I guess that would mean that there wouldn't be much water left, you know? Didn't pass. I mean, we lost by 1 vote, but I do think that having just traveled through Utah and gone to 4 of the 5 national parks there, and just to see how the visionaries of you know, previous generations thought to put land aside for national parks so that people in the future, you know, right now could enjoy them, and in the respect that in general people have. But it's a learning experience. And I had never traveled out west as a child. I mean, I was in the East Coast. That was where I was from. That was where I spent my summers. And so it's been a very broadening experience for me to come to the Rocky Mountains. And one of the first summers we were out here, my husband and I went to a lecture that I'd read about in the paper that Kurt Clanky, who I'm sure everyone on this call knows, who he is in Trout Unlimited, was giving at Granby Ranch. And he had filmed some people in Denver, and he asked them where their water came from. And just about everyone he interviewed said, the tap. So, you know, when I say that I think we have another mountain to climb, you know, for education, it isn't just people who live on the Front Range, but people who live here as well. You know, I mean, I look out my windows of my house. I have a wonderful view. I'm very fortunate, and I can see the sunset. And you know, this morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, when I had to take the dog out, I looked up, and it's just the stars in the sky, and the ability to see that is just so phenomenal. I mean, as a child, the only way I saw that was to go to the Hayden Planetarium in New York City. So it's, you know, that has been really a tremendous experience for me to have and to take advantage of.
Yeah. Well, I'll use this time to make a plug for the Headwaters Center to talk about the education of water and water resources in Grand County. Our event on Sunday the 10th will be at the Headwaters Center in Winter Park. And during the length of the event, which is going to be 1 to 5, attendees will have free access to the River Journey, which is the educational museum at the lower level of the center. You can walk through a life-size model of the Moffat Tunnel. You learn about where water comes from and goes to specifically right here on the Continental Divide from Grand County to Denver and the Front Range. And if you can't come on Sunday, because this video might be posted after, The Colorado Headwaters Land Trust does support many ticket holders or many tickets to the river journey for students, us and Trout Unlimited together. We mentioned Kurt Klinke. The two organizations combined our resources to support children accessing that educational center. So thanks for that opportunity to make that pitch. And also you mentioned Dark Skies. We had an event just in August during the height of the Perseid shower on one of our conservation easements, actually the Daisy Meadows easement, which is David's backyard, with a local astronomer. And we got to talk about the stars and talk about the importance of dark skies. And we hope to make that event annual. Whether it's on the same easement or different is yet to be seen. So if anyone watching is interested in seeing dark skies, especially if you live in a place like Denver or Boulder, and coming out to the mountains and just looking up, it's really quite an amazing sight from a conservation easement, no ambient light around you, and just really see that. So again, Paula, that was really great. You know, all three of you have mentioned this balance between landscape and development, between rural life and urban life. And a lot of times people will ask me where the land trust sits in that balance of, are you anti-development, you know, where, and they try and catch me. They say, well, where do you live if you don't live in a house? And I say, well, I live in a cabin, it still counts. But the land trust, as I think most conservation organizations, we aren't anti-development, we aren't anti-growth, we are anti-bad development. We want to see smart growth and personally concentrated growth in order to preserve those larger spaces, those open spaces, while still allowing people like the four of us and our families to live in places like this, surrounded by that open space. That's something that comes to me fairly frequently, and it's a question that I have that answer, but I'd like to be able to say more, and without unfortunately having to lecture somebody on what this means to be collaborative, to be in that balanced zone.
You know, Jeremy, you say that, and I think that's exactly right. We're not an anti-development organization. What we are, a lot of what we are, is an organization about people controlling their future and their land and their property. When people come to give they want to create an easement on their property, at that time they have the power to work with the land trust to determine what's going to happen to that land. It's not we over the years, you know, I've heard people say, "Oh, I don't want to be involved with the land trust. They're going to tell me what to do." Well, that's not the case. When we put together an easement with a property owner, we work with the property owner so that the property owner can do what they want to do with the property, you know, within the constraints of conservation, because there are rules and so forth about this. And so that's a very important thing. This is a private, a lot of what we do, not everything now, but a lot of what we do is private, and it allows a private landowner to control the destiny of this property, which is, I think personally, is a very good thing.
I agree. Yeah, I'll elaborate on that. We have currently over 9,180 acres in conservation across Kern County on 65 conservation easements, and safely all but about 270 are private. They were done with private landowners. The land remains in the family. We have ranching families of many different species of farm animals and ranchland animals, but we also have ranchettes and properties like what's behind the Doty's place. So it is something, like you said, that it's a family or an individual who really cares about the future of their land. That's great. Well, we're coming up on time here, and there are no questions coming in. So I guess I'll wrap up and start with Paula to ask any final words or statements to give to the public or encourage them to take steps in the future.
I think to me, the most important thing is to look around you every day and to realize what it takes to keep that environment the way that it is, in terms of the really natural disasters that we've experienced in the last year and a half. not just here in Colorado, but elsewhere in the country. You know, whether you believe in what the causes are for some of those disasters, the facts are that those disasters are occurring. And I think that we need to be mindful of what we can do. Miles talked about it from the Forest Service about replanting and how important it is for trees. And the bark beetle did such a job in this area. And when people come to visit here from out of Colorado, and we drive through Berthoud Pass, I said, well, what is that gray color? Well, those are the dead trees. Well, why are they still there? You know, and then, you know, just the enormity of the job of trying to have the environment be a healthy one, you know, for the future, and how important trees are, and, you know, for precipitation. And I think that's why I think the educational component is so important. And so that's where I'm coming from.
Well, thank you. David, any final words for the crowd?
Oh, you know, I guess very simply, I'm looking at Paula's screen and you see what I see behind her. That's what we're trying to keep, so that it somewhat, you know, I mean, I think we're just here. And I loved what Stuart was saying. We're a facilitator, you know, we're not going around and guiding. We're only here to work with and hold the hand and provide the process to establish an option that can, you know, kind of solve the issue and challenges that a landowner might have, that is sitting there going, I have these competing issues that I'm trying to protect and save, but then use, but then, you know, have an economic, I mean, we're a great solution, and we're here to guide people through. And I think that's to try to achieve the balance and see and keep that view that's, you know, that almost looks like a painting, and it's beautiful.
And there are a couple conservation easements behind her, so
yes.
I can take credit, or we can take credit for that view as
yes.
well. All right, Stuart, last words.
Well, I'll just say that those of you who are watching this are, or we hope will be, supporters of our organization. This is part of our event to support the organization, and your support is obviously appreciated monetarily. That's helps us get through the year and keep Jeremy's dog and dog food and so forth. But seriously, but support is also, you know, as Paula said, look around you, see what we have. If the opportunity comes to do something to help protect what we have, take the opportunity. If you have ideas for us, let us know what they are. So the support is more than just monetary, it's other things. And we appreciate your support. We really, really do, because without our supporters, we'd really be nothing. So thank you.
Thank you, Stuart.
Also.
And so with that, I'll return to Two Hats Off for Headwaters. This again is our annual fundraising event to support our mission. Sorry, computer is acting up. To support our mission which is to conserve and steward the open lands and natural character of the headwaters of the Colorado River in partnership with the local community. And we certainly spoke to that tonight, what that community means to us. I'll remind everyone that you can go back in our YouTube channel to watch previous panels from this event, as well as for over the last year. And then on Sunday the 10th, we'll be meeting at the Headwaters Center. There's a silent auction going on, and you watch the PowerPoint at the start and end of this video, and you can find a link to that silent auction. There's a live auction, and like Stuart said, we appreciate all types of support. Financial is definitely a good one, but also just general community support is really appreciated. So thank you, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.